guys stop acting stupid.
I know, I will, that's impossible.
Alright, we're good to go.
Okay, we'll call the December Planning Commission meeting to order. And do the Pledge of Allegiance. Don't sit down yet. Okay. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. They don't do that in school anymore, do they?
They do actually.
Do they?
Yep.
Do they still?
In elementary, it's every day, and I think middle school once a week.
Oh. I went to Catholic school, and immediately after doing the Pledge of Allegiance, we would say a prayer, you know, where you would do this and then say a prayer.
Oh, yeah.
So I get into high school, into homeroom for the very first time, and you're sitting there and we do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I immediately start to do this. Yeah, let's just say I didn't start off my freshman year.
That's all right, that's always
fantastic.
appropriate. And when you start 7th grade, you really need it.
Under God.
Yes. Let's see, do I have a motion to adopt the agenda, or does anybody have anything to add?
I'd move if we adopt the agenda.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And then we have minutes from two, I could remember one. And we have minutes from March meeting and May meeting. Do we do separate?
All together.
All together?
Yep.
Okay.
I have a comment though on
March, gotcha.
the March one.
Uh-huh,
The last page,
okay.
when the motion was made and everything, in the ordinance, did it say private playgrounds?
I
Or-
wrote that down because I know you had brought it up, and I believed that it did.
Okay.
And we were thinking of, in particular, is it called Maple Plain Meadows?
Yep.
Or whatever, that,
We
because
asked that
Mardell brought it up.
be in there,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure, did it really get in the final?
I know it was brought up at council, and I don't know if you remember that specifically, Caitlin. When we were talking about the predatory sex offender, it would have been one of your first.
I was at the meeting where they voted.
Okay.
So I was not part of it.
Okay.
And I think part of the
I know
reason
that
we
was
did,
discussed at that
We were
point.
looking at playgrounds,
Yeah.
like, period.
Yeah,
No
and
matter
and when it
public
comes
fund.
to that, Mark does a really good job of taking all of your guys' comments and making sure all of them are shared.
Okay.
So I'd have to look back. I believe it was added in, that private playground was added into the final ordinance
Okay.
in there.
That
So
was my only comment.
The one comment that I had in particular for the March minutes was that it was awful brief, and I'm
Mhm.
thinking that this was the meeting where we got into a lot of detail. Stefan
I was wondering
had,
that myself.
yeah, Stefan had been the one that actually helped them to come to an agreement. And part of the reason that I'm bringing it up has to do with the paper copy
Mhm.
is the official record. And
Correct.
part of it is, I know that with the CUP, it probably is in the CUP, but I'd also like it to be documented, not every single solitary word, but there was a lot of discussion.
Yep.
And it's not there. So and part of it that I remember is because for the very first time ever, I did this in order to stop people from continuing to talk, and I've never had to do that.
Sure.
So I think yes, because there was, if Stefan hadn't done the homework for them they wouldn't have gotten their CUP.
Yeah, I apologize. I did the minutes, and I'm trying to remember back to March in there. I don't think that one was recorded or it didn't work. So that was
Okay.
part of the issue there. So
Um,
I do remember now what you're talking about, the site plan you drew up, Stefan, that was spot on.
With the
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
really good
it was
work.
so long ago, I wasn't sure if it was the March 2nd meeting or something prior to that was already covered, but yeah, this was the meeting.
I can
There was a
add
ton
that
of-
in.
Ton of discussion that we had.
I can add in, I know, your part and Stefan's part there.
Yeah, yeah, well, you don't have to say that. I use the symbol to stop.
Well, it was just, there was just a lot of back and forth, a lot of good discussion, and, yeah, we should make record of that.
Yeah,
I guess it's all past tense now, I'm sure it was passed by the council, but.
yeah. And on the whole,
Very fast.
he at least hasn't been, that I've seen in MnDOT right away.
Yeah.
I can't say much about the other things. Every once in a while I see maybe more
I think
cars.
I had an issue with him. Ooh, shoot, I know last spring, pretty quick after he was approved, I really kind of stayed on him. I think I saw like a couple days ago, he had one car pulled up, and I didn't like that, but it was in his parking requirements, but he pulled just one up, so it wasn't that right away, but from what I've seen, he's corrected that since, I don't know if that was like 5 minutes or,
Did he end up striping it?
yes, yep.
The way we had laid out?
I went out there, and that was one of the things I wanted him to do, is that you need to stripe this.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
The
we're in
thing
trouble.
that I saw was, I think
Yep.
he had, cars that were for sale, where, like, clients or customers would park.
Sure.
Or something, and, but on the whole, it looks good. Well, should we make a motion to approve both minutes, as
Or do we
amended?
wanna see March again after additions, or are we okay with? 'Cause you said you didn't have a record or
Mm-mm.
recording of it, so it's gonna be tough.
Yeah,
it's up to you guys.
I'm willing to let it go.
Not a big deal.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the minute meetings for March and May.
Okay.
With additions
Mhm.
With- yeah,
to March.
March.
by Bobby. And I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Then, now, what I did, when I sent, the note to Bobby, there had been a joint meeting, that, which is why, at which, we went over the comprehensive plan community survey. And, so I had that I wanted, and then also, I asked to have included, thank you, where the vision, or kind of like what's the most current thing that the city council is working on. So that's why this is here. And, I don't know that we have to go through the whole comprehensive plan community survey, but were there things that you guys thought were more surprising or revealed something you were kind of surprised at?
With the
With the
community
survey.
I mean, not really. And I guess the reason for that is just knowing kind of our demographics coming in to it, is I know that we have a lot of families that are young families moving in, and then we've got a lot of lifers here in Maple Plain. So we've got people that have been here a long time, which brings our population up a little bit in terms of age. And then we've got, at a certain point, those homes then roll over, and then you've got these young families moving in. And I think a lot of the answers that you find in this community survey is reflective of both of those parties pretty close. You've got a demand for playgrounds as like the number one. Well, that fits younger families more, and there's a lot of things in here that speak to an older population as well. So nothing too much shocked me. I think it's important to remember though when reviewing this is that okay, this is about we sent out about 670 of these, and we got about 250 responses, which for a community survey, that's lights out. I mean, that's really good. That's engagement from the community wanting their thoughts to be heard, and that's really good. But it's important too, some of the questions we're asking don't have context to it. So you're asking questions, would you be comfortable investing and spending dollars on redevelopment? Or would you be in favor of, city hall or a fire department or all these different things? We're just throwing questions at them. We're not saying, here's some information on what we're looking at a specific deal or anything like that. And so you have to take it with, okay, this is good. These are some good general responses, but this doesn't necessarily mean this is set in stone. It's just something to work off of. That's nice to have.
Well, and to your comment about, the city hall and or the fire department, that was one of the ones where people responded back going, why is there something going on or something wrong or, whatever. And so they at least, wrote something in when they were wondering, what are y'all talking about?
And the idea is just to get an initial impression.
Yes.
Of course, if one of these do come to fruition, we'll, give more education and in that sense, but just, without knowing anything, what do you
Well, and I thought it
Yeah.
was interesting in if you're looking at City Hall, where somebody mentioned that City Hall should be in, downtown or
Mhm.
in the center, and yet others thought it was fine.
Right.
Where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I found that to be
Mhm.
curious. Did any of you have any specific questions or thought that there was anything?
Yeah, that's one of the first things that I said was, there's a line through town that nobody looks one way or the other. Don't we have to have some center to town? And I think City Hall,
Yeah. Well, and I think traditionally, when I think of, where I grew up or, other
Mhm.
places that I've been,
Mhm.
it is in the downtown, it is
Yeah.
in,
Right.
where they could find it. I know when they needed to move, one of the things was talking about, going over and, I don't know, putting you all in a closet in Public Works or something, I have no idea, but to go that way, that just seemed too weird. This has a little bit more presence, but I also have neighbors who I don't think have ever set foot on the north side
Yeah.
of town.
Mhm.
So, their comment one time to me was, well, where's Independence Street? And they've been here, I am not kidding you, like forever.
Yeah.
And I said, it's Discovery School and, kind of
I
by
think-
the church, and I guess they never have the occasion to have to come
Sure.
over here.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mention that because, we keep track of obviously people stopping in and paying their utility bills. The ones that come in are on the north side of town because City Hall is right on this side of Highway 12. So there's a lot of familiar faces that you see and you go, oh, just want to come in, see how City Hall's, what's going on here at City Hall, and, I just walked over here and want to pay my utility bill. I think that's fantastic, but it's, now it's a challenge of, okay, how do we get more people, even from south of Highway 12,
Yeah.
to stop in and see what's going on in City Hall? I think that's important, so.
What are you planning, I know that there, was a little blurb in the paper, so
Mhm.
that was good. But how are you planning on using these things? And I know that there'll be more continued meetings.
Mhm.
So you're gonna use these to go along with some of the things for the comp plan, or
Yeah.
what are you thinking of for the?
Yeah, so it's kind of a process. A lot of what needs to be done in comp plan updates are mandated. So there's certainly room for, if we want to make changes, we certainly can do that, but a lot of it is mandated from our first joint planning meeting. The precedent was set that we're fairly developed in Maple Plains, so there's not a whole lot of work that needs to be done to our comp plan. Our comp plan is our comp plan a little bit, but there's some tweaks that could happen there. As this process goes, there's more room for input. You know, that's gonna be kind of the next meeting. I believe there's a joint meeting coming up in, I believe it's
January?
January or February, yeah.
There's one in January with, with the planning
Yep.
commission, and then a joint one,
Yep,
and then again in February.
yep. And I think it's important too that, you know, one of the aspects that came out of our last joint planning commission city council meeting was, how do we kind of aggressively look at a beautification type
Mhm.
program of Highway 12? You know, that was
Yeah.
the big thing that stuck with me as, you know, planning commission, city council together saying, look, guys, I mean, we need to figure out how can we make this a little bit better looking when you're driving through 12, because you're right, we've got a few businesses or a few different things going on along Highway 12 that it's not the most pleasant thing to be driving by in a small town. So it's how do we aggressively look at that? And we're open for all ideas on how to do that. I think that's a good place for planning commission to look at too, is some of those things.
It's on my list.
Well, the whole issue of appearance of the city, not only
Mhm.
Highway 12, but the neighborhood as well, was very prominent in the
Mhm.
responses that
Mhm.
I saw. And I'm not even sure you were really asking for appearance type, you know, responses, but you got a lot back, so I think that's telling that.
And if you looked at like our city services chart, I thought that was really reflective, a lot of the answers that were given there. One of them was overall appearance of the city, and that wasn't in the great category. That was, we're okay, you know, we're not, it's not atrocious, but it's not great either, so we're okay. So I think that's a good indication, that general chart of kind of looking at, you know, the city and saying, okay, where do we need to improve?
What page was that on?
I think that's,
At the end?
we're on 11 here. So there's 3 categories, good, fair, and poor. And I'm really pleased that the vast majority of the responses were in the good category. You can see the votes broken down. I think this is a really excellent kind of chart that gauges how we're doing, and it kind of gives some quantitative data of just saying, all right, you're good, but how much more good than fair are you? I kind of like this. I think it's nice, even though we got a third of our residents and businesses responding. But looking at it, I think it was kind of hit right on the head in terms of, you know, overall appearances of the city and condition of city streets. Those are the ones that really jump out. You look, they're in the low 60s for good, and you're well over 100 for fair, and poor is in the mid to high 60s as well. So I feel good about the condition of streets in terms of council has worked extremely hard putting together a capital improvement plan that doesn't just include the reconstruction of streets, but also maintenance. You know, when's it time to mill and overlay? When's it time to do seal coating? So that was very meticulously planned out with staff and council. So I feel good about that, and continuing to invest there. And I think that's one of the goals for council, is working on that infrastructure. But the overall appearance of the city, that's going to take work in a variety of areas. There is no one thing you do. It's not just dig up roads and redo your roads and you're good. That's the solution. You got to get creative at this point.
Yeah, and I think that goes towards some of the questions that I have about things that are immediate, but also what can, you know, we do as a staff and the commissions
Mhm.
and the council, and I, you know, like, West Hennepin, because they're a part of some of the enforcement of this, but how do we get people engaged? I think that if somebody says that the overall appearance of the city is important to them,
Mm-hmm.
that they're at least going to be willing to listen to, here's what we're thinking, or how would you, do it. I mean, I think every, is it the 1st of May that they have over in Independence where you can take,
Mhm.
stuff there?
It's a joint cleanup, yeah.
It's a joint cleanup, and maybe there's something that can be done around that, where it's like before, the Saturday that,
Mhm.
You do it, that somebody's sending something out saying, look around your yard, people with the stuffed animals and the,
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
this would be an opportunity for you to haul stuff away or something like that, or make it a different time. Because I think that for me, that's part of some of the issues is, I think everybody has good intentions, but then it becomes one of those things where we've always said that as we go through and work through things, and I think I brought this up, that the enforcement piece of this always somehow kind of like falls by the wayside. And I see it as, part of it has to do with, and a couple of things on my list have to do with things where people sat in front of us to get CUPs.
Mhm.
And I think of them as expectations and agreements between people. You
Mhm.
kind of negotiate, what are you going to do?
Mhm.
You're going to do something, we're going to do something in terms of the city. And so then I always think that agreement, in my head, it's an agreement. I'm always kind of surprised when people go, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, and you know what, I think you kind of touched on something real good there. It is, obviously with planning commission, one of the key things you guys do is look at, land use, so you're looking at conditional use permits, variances, and that's all part of too, improving, the aesthetic view of, sites. And I think, planning commission, looking back, you guys have approved some really good stuff, like you said, but it hasn't been kept that way. And I think that's one of the steps that has been taken recently that's worked and is working with enforcement is that fine schedule that has been implemented in a few different, the last 3, I think, planning applications that have come through have had that fine schedule. Because when we look at conditional use permits, and you really only have one option if there isn't a fine schedule in there, and that is you revoke it and their business is done.
Yeah,
Eh.
and I'm not necessarily advocating for that, but I'll use Acona because it sits at the end of my block.
Sure.
We had an agreement,
Mm-hmm.
with all the way down to, what the building would look like, what he wanted to do inside. He's, going to just put his cars in there, and yes, there would be some storage of his boats and cars and maybe others, but not a big deal, blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera. Appearance, landscaping, all those kinds of things. And, now, I don't know what you call them, but on top of barns, sometimes there's like a cupola, or there's like
Sure.
a pointy thing. Well, there's something up there, I don't know if he changed it or made it different, there was one, but anyway, it's up there, and there's something else on it that's going to be blowing in the wind and end up in somebody's yard. But one of the things for that, there's a CUP that was written
Mhm.
very tightly so that, because it is a residential area,
Mm-hmm.
that if he ever sold the property, that we could be really tight with it.
Mm-hmm.
And he sells cars out of there. He has trucks, that haul in 9, 10 cars, come and drop off all these cars and leave them there. And then he also does it onesie twosies, where maybe somebody comes in with like a little flatbed, or all of a sudden there's a car that's there waiting to be sold, with the markings on the outside. We didn't agree to that.
Correct.
And I don't want someone to come back years down the line and say, well, that was a part of the CUP, so now people can sell cars there, because it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I also don't understand why he's doing that. I look at that as a break in an agreement. And I know that, you know, people have intentions, but it also is kind of a sneaky, underhanded thing to do to a city.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're spot on there, and I know that I've met and talked with Jim Shear, who owns that property there, and he's got a valid excuse when it comes to the landscaping. Everything up to his building is in Hennepin County right away, so now he's got to get county approval on some of it, and we're saying, hey, the city approved this, but all of his property from Halgren Road all the way up to his property, that building was built right next to the right-of-way there, so it's causing some issues because that's a county road. But that's going to get resolved. We've been working with the county on that. As for the cars there, that's unacceptable, and I know that I've mentioned that to him too as well, and it's part of enforcement that we're working on taking care of with him. Because I know he brings in, it's almost like a double stack of cars that he leaves there for a day, and then the next day he takes it out, and he does it like once a month.
Okay, he's pulling your leg if he says that it happens once a month.
Sure.
And he's also pulling your leg if he says that they're all gone the next day.
Sure. No, I
They're
can believe you.
not-
I'm not going to
they're
challenge
not.
you on that. I
And-
understand how some of this goes.
And so, but the other part of it is, why is he continuing to do it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that a part of the fine? Is that a part of somebody sitting down and saying, not a
I don't
part of
think
your
he has-
CUP?
Yeah, and he doesn't have the fine schedule in his. He was the last one approved before we start implementing that fine schedule.
Okay,
I just
so
reviewed it.
they're never fined then?
We can't fine them
That's,
in terms of it's not part of the language of the conditional use permit, and it's not something we can do if it's not a part of the agreement
Okay.
in that regard.
Then if you look just strictly at the agreement,
Mm-hmm.
how do you make somebody stop doing something when that was not a part of the agreement?
You revoke the conditional use permit. That's the challenge in all of this, is because then it leaves you with one extreme or the other. So it's where we try to step in and where it becomes a process, and I understand it's frustrating then, is it's us trying to chip away at pieces of it. Can we get the landscaping done? Then address the cars. If you do it all at once, nothing ever gets done, is what I've found. You got to do it in pieces. It's kind of looking at Collision Corner. They've improved, I think, a lot over the last year and a, you know, in
Considering what they
yeah,
started
considering
with,
what they
yeah.
started with, that was the same mentality and approach that I took with Collision Corners. Let's do it in pieces. Let's get the fence. Let's do it this and that. And then all of a sudden we're getting closer and closer to our objective instead of, here's 10 things, you need all these done, because I find that doesn't resonate with someone who's not willing to do that after they've agreed to do that. So that's the tough part, and then it's all of a sudden balancing if you're not making progress.
Well, I think they need to know the entire list of
Yes.
deficiencies. I mean, you can work on a schedule of getting things done, but I think they need to know.
And we've done that.
Okay.
That's what we've gone out, Mark and myself, out onto the site and said, here are all the conditions of your conditional use permit you're not meeting. You need to meet these. These are all expected. You agreed to this.
Right.
We expect compliance.
And council has worked with you on establishing a formal process for talking
Yeah.
with businesses about that. Would you be able to share that with them? What you gave us at workshop that one day, that list of steps?
In terms of,
Kind of the process you're doing, like you talk to them once, or you send the letter, and then if they don't, they fine them, and then you follow up again, and if they don't.
yeah,
I
in.
don't remember the exact process off the top of my head. but I
Sure.
think that would be good for you guys to
So
see.
for a lot of these type of things, what we do is, obviously, he doesn't have a fine schedule in there, so we can't, but it's written communication saying, this is what you need to do. Then we meet with them. If it's not being met, there's a fine in there if there's a fine schedule in there. And it's continual compliance. The challenge with this site is that fine schedule isn't there to help give us teeth. But we've talked about with council to implementing a almost like fine type system into just our general ordinance where we could enforce it on any of these things, and that's still something I'm looking into whether we can legally do. Yeah, that's the challenge. So it's one step at a time. I can't say I've walked through his building and he's met every requirement on the inside of his building.
Yeah, I know he's worked a lot. There were, I mean, it's been a solid year or more of workers
Mhm.
in there and, working on the outside and with the windows and, I'm sure he's got a security system that
Is next.
fabulous.
Yeah, sure. But you're right though, Michelle, and I think planning commission spoke to this and council. It's, okay, that's great, you've got the inside, but we're talking about aesthetics here. So we need to get the outside as nice as it is on the inside.
Well, and aesthetics, and then also using the property the way that it was set up.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Correct.
think, I mean, I want it to look nice, and I want all of the things that were part of the CUP. But I think when, because there's a huge part of me that now looks very jaded at him,
Mm-hmm.
thinking, you sat there and you said you were gonna do X, and you were doing Y within, minutes
Oh,
or
I
whatever
know.
of you being there. I don't find that to be a very,
Well, it's
honest
hard.
business person.
Yeah, it's hard to keep the trust there when someone says one thing to your face and then does another.
Yeah,
That's absolutely right.
yeah.
Well, the other thing in terms of appearances too, not only, following up with CUPs, but just general appearance of some of the residential properties too.
Yes.
Where we don't
Sure.
have such agreements, but just have, nuisance ordinances
Yeah.
that, and I understand that's, it's a touchy, difficult
Yep.
thing to enforce, but
And
I think that's a lot of what the residents were
One thing that-
responding to.
I think, I did a little bit of it before Nicole got here, but Nicole's really taken a much more aggressive approach in terms of code enforcement. So it's writing letters to property owners. I know we've had a couple of examples where we've got them to clean up the site, and then a month later it was back to where it was at. So then you got to follow up again, do it all over again, and
Yeah.
there are specific steps in terms of how we can deal with that.
Is there something, and I had asked the question at the joint meeting, is there something, I mean, not that can happen like today or even tomorrow, but where, is there anything anywhere where there are monies for homeowners or for a city to help a homeowner
Yeah.
that does not have, we have, as was pointed out, we have an aging population. That usually means diminished monies.
Sure.
And I think of, I wanna stay in my house as long as I can. And I know that a lot of other people want to do that as well. But as their monies, you have to think about what you're going to be paying for. Is there ever anything where somebody can say, the outside of your building needs to have new, fascia or new whatever, so that the
Mhm.
squirrels that are going into
Yeah.
people's houses and or garages. And that's a part of how it looks too, because sometimes the nuisance aspect, those kinds of things aren't always seen.
Yeah, that's something that every city kind of has to handle, and different cities have handled it different ways. So, obviously, if a building is in really bad shape, it has to be structurally sound, has to be, in a position where it's safe to be in, and we have our West Metro that does that. But when it's coming to, like, the actual appearance, we do have some for businesses, but residential homes we don't in terms of money that we invest in. I know different cities have invested a lot of money in free grants to homeowners to invest in their property, because by doing so, down the road, the city gets the money back in return through increase to property values.
Yeah.
In a small town like Maple Plain, that's a harder thing to accomplish.
Yeah.
It just is. But trying to find grants or opportunities for individual homeowners, it's typically not something we see coming
Okay.
that's available through public programs. Usually a lot of the grant money are for public services, not so much private entities such as a home. And that's one of the challenges. So it's how do we overcome that? How do we do that? And I don't have the answer off the top of my
Yeah.
head right
and,
now.
And I don't necessarily either. I've got, you know, ideas, but it's everything from, you know, houses that are kind of falling apart to, this year, a lot of people's yards have like looked miserable. And, you know, where the grass grows way, way, way too long and or never gets cut. And you know, I don't know if there's like a bunch of little worker bees that we could get, you know, to help people.
Sure.
I always think that there must be a reason that they're not able to do something. And so,
Sure.
you know, but I also know that people are very private and have a hard time asking sometimes. But
For
it's
help.
also one of those things where, you know, if there is something that's wrong or that they just need a little help, I don't know.
Absolutely. No, that's where you really like the young kids that are trying to start their lawn mowing business
Yeah.
to get involved, because then they can, you know, get 4 or 5 properties in the neighborhood and maintain those. Maybe it's people who have trouble maintaining their yard. Just it's hard to get out there and do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's yeah, no, I agree. I think that'd be awesome.
Well, we'll have to put our heads together. Well, just if I ran through a couple of things that I wondered about, and others, if anybody had something that they were wondering about. It sounds like there's kind of a system, something in order, or in place in order for people to kind of take care of things. But, what do you do about things like, the dead tree in front of the schoolhouse
Mm-hmm.
that's fallen on another tree? I mean, the owner of the building is responsible for that, aren't they? And
Correct.
and it just is gonna sit there till what? It ends up either on the lines or takes down the other tree.
I mean, it's kind of like code enforcement. You talk to them, you try and get them to do it, and if they don't do it, then the city can come in and take care of it and assess it to them. I mean, that's the end result.
Okay.
So-
How does it get done then? I mean, is it somebody, you know, there's lots of people who've seen it.
Mhm.
But does it require that somebody formally write something out and say that it needs to be done? I find it interesting that a building owner thinks that
Sure.
they're going to sell property
With
a
that
tree
tree.
leaning on it, but.
Yeah, no, I
I'm kinda
think that's an
weird.
interesting scenario with just that building owner in general, working with him. That's an interesting deal. That's about as much as I'll go there. I will.
Okay, we have so many of those kind of people.
Yeah, there is a few of them that it's like, okay, guys, you know.
We're like the wild.
And
west.
that's why, you know, I think, Michelle, I'm going to maybe try and speed this up because we could pick examples out all night.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, I mean, it's everything, where I just kind of am curious,
Mhm.
what happens if people see something and say something? Do we have to go through a formal writing something down? Is that the best way?
That is ideal. I mean, if someone calls in and says, this is really bothering me, we need to take care of this, that works as a complaint in my mind.
Okay.
So I formally written down is always better than verbal. It's just, it is
Okay,
for
but if
filing
somebody
purposes.
called, they have to come in and formally do it, or you do it formally, like you're hearing a complaint and so you say,
Typically,
so-and-so.
typically I'd want their signature on it, just to validate the complaint that it's coming from this person. Otherwise, if it was ever to be challenged and we went to court or anything, because that's how these can go too. You go down that road and you end up in court.
yeah.
It's their signature on a complaint is worth something. Me writing down their complaint
Yeah.
isn't worth anything in court. So that's important, but I mean, typically we try to resolve it if someone calls in and says, hey, I'm really upset about the tree that's leaning there. It's, you know, a written communication saying, hey, we've received a complaint. We can't legally release who's complaining to anyone. That's against the law. But we've received a complaint, you need to take care of this. If they don't do it, then we try to meet with them face to face and say, you're not meeting this, come on. then followed by another written letter. We give them 2 written letters, and then it's, okay, now we're looking at, failed to reach compliance. Now we're looking at bringing someone in, doing it, and then assessing it back to them through their taxes. And that's something that we need to get more aggressive with.
Yeah, because I
In
think
helping
those are
clean
some of
up.
the things that are part of the appearance thing, and then that I see as something that's dangerous.
Mhm.
So I kind of, what's up with the water stinking, smelling,
How long has this been going on?
weeks?
Within like the last 4 weeks?
Yeah,
So,
easily.
yeah, I haven't heard anyone call or complain about that, have you? So I haven't heard anybody call or complain about that. I can give you a possible explanation.
Oh, that would help.
So a possible explanation.
I'm drinking water that's going to kill me.
No, oh, no. We test our water very regularly. We have
Well,
to.
I thought you did.
Oh, absolutely. No, that is our one of our number one things you have to do. I go to jail if we don't do that. So that's pretty important that we do, and we do that. And I get our yearly drinking and quarterly reports from the state. Our quality of water is improved in terms of, we had a radon issue. At one point, it was a little high.
Radon or radium?
Radium, yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
Thanks, yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
thought.
radium. And we've corrected that to the point of where we had to do quarterly testings for radium, and now it's yearly. So the state did, that was this year, so that was a big deal. We actually just got Well 4 online, and so part of what you might be experiencing, and this is my possible solution, not saying it is what's going on, but we're trying to figure out mixing water from Well 4 and Well 3 in the treatment plant and getting that out. How's that formula work? And part of that is a trial and error of just, how do you run when do you run Well 3, when do you run Well 4? Do you run them both at the same time? Do you not? But you got to operate them both. One can't say stagnant. You got to use both of the wells. And so that's part of the, that could be part of it, but I guess you're the first one I've heard mention that.
Well.
So.
Are your neighbors?
I haven't asked that when we've been, when we see each other, that hasn't been one of the things that actually has come to mind.
Do you have a water softener by chance?
No.
Okay.
No.
And I don't live that far away from you, and I haven't noticed that at all. I haven't noticed any change.
I haven't either, except only when they come to flush the
Yep.
hydrants, then you get some sediment, but,
Yeah, brown.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, it stinks.
I'm sorry, I can't give you a better answer for that there, Michelle.
This is.
Write a formal complaint.
Complaint,
sign.
yeah.
Well,
You
I don't know,
y'all
I mean-
can come over and smell it.
Well, it sounds like a lot of the little miscellaneous stuff like this is complaint driven rather
Yeah.
than,
Yeah,
you're not,
okay.
We
you're not
can't-
nuisance police, you don't drive around looking.
No,
for things, right?
and part of that is we just don't have the staffing to do
Yeah,
that.
I'm sure.
Yeah, we
And
don't.
if we could have a code enforcement officer, that'd be great. But
I think we could definitely keep a code
You're the closest we have.
enforcer busy within the city, that's for sure. That's a full-time job. But,
Well, I'm just wondering, there was a lot of complaints in here about miscellaneous
Yeah.
appearance issues. And two things, I guess. One, is there a plan to reply back to the citizens and say, here's what we heard and here's what we're gonna do about it? And that's one of the things that is prominent in here, maybe, I know you don't wanna be the nuisance police, so to speak.
Mhm.
Maybe in that, and I think the other thing I heard at our joint meeting was about communication back to the public, right? So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
You could communicate back to the public with the results and, dare
So-
I say, maybe encourage people if there are issues to let you know.
Yeah.
File a complaint, whatever, if there's a process for that, then you're not the bad guys,
Mhm.
right? You're not the bad cops.
Oh, we're always the bad cops.
Well,
Doesn't
you
matter
can
how that
say
goes.
but at least you don't have to like go on patrol looking
Yeah.
for it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. And yeah, I think when going after this, there's a couple of things that make it a little bit tougher to reply than just a standard complaint, because if someone comes in and says, hey, I've got a complaint, and gives it to us, we keep them up to date on that, just to say, hey, this is what we're doing. We're working on this. And a lot of the times it's, oh, this was taken care of. Thank you. Thank you for taking care of this. One is not everyone left a name, so I don't know who left all the complaints. Some of them I do, who has a name on their survey, but not all of them.
Yeah, I didn't mean that these were official complaints. I was
Yeah, but just trying to respond back to them
Yeah.
is challenging.
No, I mean, you'd
in
have to
that
do it
regard.
citywide.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was nice is, A, we got a good article in the paper talking about the community survey.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
and then B, this is published on our website. I think we did a really good job in terms of getting people to fill it out online. So I think a lot of people know the results are out there and where to get them. But it's what makes these things kind of work and stick is just continuing to reference back to it, not forgetting about it. This is the information.
Some of them are kind of hard to forget when you're.
Oh, yeah.
Go by 'em every day.
As someone as a staff member and head of staff, I look at this and it's you look at this and it kind of just lays out a map of different things you want to tackle. You want to
Yeah.
you want to take care of
I
these.
think I also kind of heard people were a little bit resigned to, well, nothing's ever going to happen kind of thing, right? Or,
Mhm.
or we say things or respond to these sorts of things, but we never see much action. And so they're not really, and then it doesn't mean that you're not acting, it's just that they're not.
Well,
aware.
I think Stefan, you're hitting on a bigger topic, and that is just there's culture things too. So it's how do we continue to get more civic engagement. Now, what's nice and what gave me hope, is civic engagement is a huge thing that in this community we need to get better at. The good news is we had 250 responses. That's
Mhm.
civic engagement right there that I did not think would happen. That's really positive. That means that people are engaged. We're just not reaching them the right way.
But we did it 10 years ago,
Sure.
with the design team. We got a great response and whatever. And in the 10 years since, nothing's happened.
Not only did we
It
get,
had a lot to do with the economy
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
and a lot to, but I think you kind of look at that. Okay, we answered this 10 years ago, and yet nothing's happened.
But it did, and that's part of my discomfort with all of this is because I think that there was a period of time where we had the banners, which have disappeared.
Sure.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
They haven't been up for a couple of years.
Sure.
Why? We had.
Nobody seems to
two-
know where they are even.
Find
That
them.
was Nicole's project.
Okay.
Yes, no, that's something I've been trying to. Public Works is busy
Look
Have,
at
to
have
no
you,
end.
have you literally, I don't,
Yeah.
I'm probably more riled about this one than some of the
Sure.
other ones.
Sure.
Because I was a part of this.
Yeah.
There were lots of people. We had grants that we got.
Mhm.
We had 2 artists put together these things. We spent a year or more with designs, with going through and how they were going to look. And if it means that somebody has to literally go down to that building and look yourself as a city employee, because you should be able to walk into every city building in this,
Mhm.
in this town, find those banners. Because
I
it
th-
would be an insult to all the people who went through and did what they
Mhm.
did, to the artists, and they were nice.
Yeah, I'm not gonna blame Nicole for them not being up. I think they've been up for a while. So I think it's
No,
s-
Nicole was gonna
Yeah,
ask.
yeah.
Well,
So I'm not
no, and
I'm
I
not
don't
going
mean
there.
it that
That's
way either.
sure.
Wherever they are, we need to find them. We had sculptures, metal sculptures, at the same time that we did the 2 signs, coming and going in town.
Sure.
And the sculptures of like the carp or the fish and the turtle and the whatever are sitting over by the old
Mhm.
museum. And so we need to keep track of those things, because there were things that were done that kind of helped people kind of go and say, oh, I do like going down the street, going
Mhm.
down Division, going into, downtown and
Sure.
finding these things.
Mhm.
And so when I hear that they can't be found, then that tells me that somebody doesn't think that this town is as important as I do.
Mhm.
Sure. No,
And-
yeah, I get that frustration.
I wanna slap somebody.
Yeah, no.
Not you guys, not you
No,
guys.
no, absolutely.
Whoever lost them.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing too is, I think prior to that joint meeting, I was like, banners, we've got banners. So some of this is just because we haven't been here for 5 years. There's things that we're not aware of that it's really nice that you guys are bringing it to our attention, because then we want to get that out there. That helps some of this.
To go look for them.
So-
Do you know what's in this building from that project?
Those pictures.
And what else?
The gym.
The gym?
Yep.
And what else?
I'm not sure.
In the room off from your office.
All those
and
paintings in the conference room.
Those are what the banners are.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
Those are the original artwork that we made the banners
Okay.
from.
Okay.
That's what the banners look like.
And one of the artists that did one set of the banners
Mhm.
that went down 12 did the building
Oh, sure.
down here in Northside Park.
Okay.
Yep.
And,
And City Hall.
and
Yeah.
City
And
Hall,
the gym.
and the big sign,
And the gym.
yeah.
Okay.
And the sign, where City Hall is.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
That was a big
That's a big deal.
project that we did
Mhm.
Absolutely.
with grants.
Well, and it
for-
went from, the Minnesota design team helping us to kind of get together, that Maple Plain put together something that went for a number of years to create the guidelines,
Mhm.
Maple Plain
Yeah.
design guidelines. And some of the other things that did happen, and it did encourage, people were encouraged, there was a little bit more. And I know that there's been a lot of, changes in terms of administration and councils and all those kinds of things. And that all creates stuff where we're kind of sitting.
And I
but-
think that was the turnover in Public Works is why we lost the banners.
Yeah, but they were there.
But the new people didn't know to put them up because they never did that.
Well, like I said in the joint meeting, the work that was done back with the design team 10, 11 years ago, as you mentioned, was huge. I mean, you got 240 some respondents
Yeah.
by email or dropping off. We had over 300 people come to a meeting.
Yeah.
300 people come to a meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
That's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, so there was a lot of buzz about it, and a lot of good stuff came out of it, and I think it's all quite still valid and
Yeah.
worth including in the next comp
Well,
plan.
and-
Or right, and we're gonna, just talking to Mark the other day, talking about incorporating the gateway into those, the design guidelines
Well,
and making sure.
The gateway and, this, area
Yeah.
over here.
Bud.
And Bud,
Yep.
and then downtown.
Yeah.
Yep.
Those three things came out of
Right.
The down.
that.
Right.
that
And I think it's
thing.
important too, and I have to credit Planning Commission too for this, is that, when we do have these land applications coming forward, we're still bringing up the downtown guidelines. If you're gonna change the facade of the building, you've gotta meet
Yeah.
our guidelines and hold them to it, and that is part of our deal, so that's gonna aesthetically help.
New developments.
New developments coming in, and we're working on, if you guys want, I can give you guys some updates of different things to look forward to in 2018.
Yes, what?
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
What's going to happen?
Well, I can't give you all the specifics, but I can tell you, there's potential for some real development here in town, in the Gateway District potentially, and of course, we're working on downtown. We're progressing further in some of these talks than in years past, in pretty significant developments. I would expect, for sure, a land use application coming in early 2018 for a Gateway District development. So that's one thing. I would expect, we're in the tail half of our exclusive developers agreement with Gordon James Construction on downtown. There's been progress made. We have been able to work with the developer in trying to get different partners to make a building happen. His agreement essentially expires at the end of 2018, and that's if there was a 6-month extension granted by city council in the summertime. So even if it's coming up, so it's either